Hello, Mr. Facundo. How are you?
I'm on my phone. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm on my phone also.
No.
So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction, which I'm going to cut this part out, and then turn your camera off.
Okay.
And then as soon as I introduce you, just turn it on and then just say, hey, guys, and Zoom will automatically switch to you in the recording.
Okay, now give me one moment. I'm going to go get a snack, okay?
You're a bitch. Hey, where'd you get that couch from?
It's one of my housemates.
So welcome to the next podcast of A Reasonable Bear. And today I'm excited to share with you guys a guest. We have a guest on the show today. That's right. It's not just me talking to myself like normal. We have a guest, and he is from Uruguay, and he is here in America, and he's not going anywhere. He's going to stay here. He's a proud American, almost a Trump supporter, but not quite. And he is here to tell you a little bit about his experience coming to America, what it's been like growing up in America, some things that he likes and some things he doesn't like, and also to give us an idea about some religious ideas that are important to him, and maybe some political ideas also. We'll see how things go. But without any further ado, let me welcome onto the show Facundo Lopez. Thank you for being on the show, Facundo.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this new endeavor.
Absolutely. I love the hair.
I know. It's quarantine hair. So, okay, so I've never in my life have had hair this long, ever. And
I like the beard, by the way. You know, you're working on it. You'll get there.
I think it's good for men, but particularly Western men, to try to see what they would look like a bit more untamed, you know? We're told typically that, or at least in my culture, my Uruguayan culture, or in America too, that we should be shaved and polished and kind of very rigid, or perhaps that's kind of my ideology that I kind of stuck to for a while, for a long while.
I get it. You want to be rugged.
I've never, yeah. So I've never been rugged, and so I'm trying it, and it's actually it works with all the girls.
Like, this is the fucking thing to be. I can't believe I missed out on this for years. It took coronavirus to bring you the level of ruggedness that you need.
Bruh, you hit it on the nail on the thing. When coronavirus started, and everyone is quarantined and then home and depressed or worried, and it began in late winter, and now we're just seeing the first blooms of spring. I said to myself, you know what? I'm now going to work, and I'm chill. I'm with my dad. I said, let's try an experiment. I've been running every day. I've been eating healthier, and it's almost like the paradise that we're told we can live in America. You know, they tell you, you know, land of dreams and so on. And yes, and I'm not even doing this to segue into the theme of today. It actually, surprisingly, I think a lot about. I'm trying to talk not too loud so my roommate next door doesn't hear. But I think a lot about the idea of the American dream, or what this mythology that we have about what it means to be here and live here. And it seems like and lots of immigrants, many Hispanic immigrants, but lots of European immigrants to America also say this. It's that the dream is to live the dream here, but then all you end up doing when you immigrate here is working, and everyone else who's successful, quote unquote, in America, all you end up doing is working. And people in Europe, like in France or Spain or Italy, which are much more laissez-faire with life, think it's an absurdity.
So you're working on your dad bod, and you don't want to work so much that you take away from the DILF look. I get it. You need to have a couple days a week to just kind of casually do push-ups, 1 an hour. You know, you don't want to work yourself too hard. I get it.
I've been a bit more.
But no, it makes sense that there's this ideal of what it's going to be to come to the great America, and then that the reality might be somewhat depressing.
Yeah. And ironically, it took a pandemic to get everyone to say, you know what? This land is abundantly plentiful. We produce enough food in the US to feed the whole world. I've heard that in several statistics, just in grains and vegetables alone.
Can you not eat those because it's super bad? We'll cut this part out, but it's super bad for the audio.
No,
You can eat the Twinkie, but that's so loud that with the crunching.
I had no idea. I picked it up. I'll stop.
It would also be super funny if we left this part in. But anyway.
Last one.
Fucking just do it.
These are veggie sticks, by the way, because I'm a health bitch. I'm a healthy bitch.
Very, very sattvic of you.
Very sattvic. Okay. I'm good.
Okay.
And by I'm good, I mean the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm just going to be thinking about jumping one of these. I'm kidding.
Okay. Well, you do your best to restrain yourself. And next thing I kind of want to talk about a little bit is this idea. Before we get into religious constructs, I want to talk about, let's talk just a little bit about modern capitalism in America. And let's talk about sort of the issues, say, with private property as it is currently understood. And maybe we can talk about how that differs from traditional Lockean private property or anything like that. I want to get into an idea here of the classical liberalism and sort of the deviations that we've taken, and maybe the way that neoliberalism has tried to or attempted to deflect those changes, and perhaps maybe you can give insight onto what classical liberalism looks like in Uruguay. In Uruguay, yeah.
Well, me and my dad, we like living here, but Uruguay's full too, So, okay, let's see. So you're saying, well, what exactly do you want? Like what topic?
Well, I wanted, for example, I want to point out that private property in its traditional and sort of rising from post-Enlightenment thought in the foundational philosophers of liberalism. When you look at Locke and his idea of private property, there's this idea inherent in private property that private property can only exist beyond the scope of what is necessary for the common welfare. This is a sort of an idea that exists, that private property can't be a hogging of resources that are needed for the common welfare, but it's an idea of surplus, that because there's so much surplus, there's the potentialities to have private property and do so harmlessly. But in this modern milieu, we have the only sort of homage to that principle we have is something like the fledgling attempts to make public various land grants or whatever. We have the problem of private institutions not being subsidized. We have a problem of libraries not being funded. We don't really have, we have very little to remember what about public property is actually doing anything to provide for the common welfare. And the areas that it is affecting common welfare, it seems massively underfunded and entirely different than probably the original frame. And so I'm wondering, like, with regard to common welfare, what do you think Uruguay does differently? And where would you say it does better? Where would you say it does worse?
That's a fantastic question. Do you mind if I close my door first and then I'll answer? So, I want to start by saying that one of the biggest misconceptions in American conservatism is to believe that socialism is new in America. If you look at the in Spanish and in French philosophy or history, the way we tell history, the period of 1750 to around 1850 is called the period of the bourgeois revolutions, las revoluciones burguesas. In America, we don't talk about the idea that the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the various French revolutions after the first one in the 1830s, 1820s, and eventually the Russian Revolution, that they're linked by several ideological threads. The Russian Revolution perhaps most distant because it's still based on Enlightenment philosophy,
Right.
but Marxism is late Enlightenment, you could say. And so, okay. The problem is that, and this is the biggest problem, and I had a million times. People try to debate definitions, and there's a million definitions for a million terms. And so some people, when they hear socialism, they hear communism. And when some people hear communism, they hear a very well-functioning social liberal democracy. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so the rather than a sort of totalitarian nightmare that many communisms or states calling themselves communists say that. And there's always a perpetual dream that there will be one or two nations that will effectively do the experiment of communism correctly or purely or whatever, which is dubious at best. So for me, if you're going to debate with someone who is not willing to be flexible with definitions and to know that their opponent or the other person they're speaking with uses X word in a certain way, then you're not going to get anywhere. Because no matter how many times I say I defend socialism provided that it means this, or I defend capitalism provided it means this and this only, and that person still hears by the word whatever negative associations, definitions they have by that, then we have a problem. And the problem there goes that they're not willing, or even better, they're not capable by given the measure of beliefs or ideas that they have, of understanding that a word can have several definitions in different contexts and different communities for different people. So, socialism, for me, and I think most people, means essentially a decaf communism and a decaf capitalism, a sort of neutral middle ground between excess laissez-faire capitalism, excess laissez-faire capitalistic indulgence, and somewhere trying to fulfill the communist dream without the sort of monastic totalitarianism of the individual having to sacrifice themselves for the greater number always.
I think that it's important for us to. Well, I do think definitions are. I do think definitions are important. One thing, for example, is you have something like a prescriptive definition for a word, and then you have it like a de facto definition, right? So, like, I think Chomsky points this out, for example, like with democracy, like there's a definitional idea of democracy that's prescriptive in the, in the Merriam-Webster kind of sense. That would be something like people have some kind of direct relationship to and or influence over political discourse. But de facto democracy is really more like the government is controlled by companies.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about democracy, we get lost sometimes semantically in which of these many possible definitions. And so I think that's the case with communism also. Like we'll see in one sense there's a very simplified version of capitalism, socialism, and communism that's commonly prescribed to. And the simplified notion is that communism wants to, essentially regulate the market by the government. In other words, there is not a free market. The market is a monolithic entity or quasi-monolithic entity that is controlled. The means of production are controlled by the government, which supposedly is in the best interest of its people. And then capitalism obviously is on the opposite end of that. Let's have the means of production open to free competition. And then socialism, in my mind, has always been more of a capitalistic structure, because you can't have socialism in a communistic state. Doesn't make any sense. But it seems to me that it tends to be adjacent to and like prescribed alongside capitalism. I think it's a helpful sort of partner in crime, as it were. I think it's almost not incompatible. I think it's almost more of a lens that we view capitalism through. It's an interpretive lens of what capitalism can be. But I also think, again, that's just a simplified version. All of these systems have complex theoretical models that work in certain local environments better than others. And so I think the mistake that we tend to make is we hypersimplify very complex systems, and then we argue on the basis of what we would think is something like a priori, like obvious likeness, right? It's obviously the case that this is false. And then we use some, sort of like logical fallacy, or we straw man the opponent. Well, don't you care about this or that, or haven't you seen the people that died? You kind of end up, even intellectual people, even smart people. Peterson ends up arguing against communism basically by the virtue of a utilitarian argument that says too many people have died. Let's look at America, and let's look at Uruguay, and let's see let's do like checks and check marks, like plus or minus. So let's talk about the social services.
Okay, so
in America, how would you rate social services on a letter grade, A to F?
Well, I personally wouldn't prefer to refer to all social services in one hit, but I'll do it still.
You can nuance it after you give the grade if you'd like.
That's good. I'll honestly give a B or a C.
Okay.
Because if by social services we mean everything that the individual, essentially public institutions, so everything from the DMV to food stamps to whatever free clinics there are, or Medicaid and Medicare, public libraries, post office, and so on, then the post office is very efficient and very strong and very useful. Public libraries, still very functional and useful.
Although I have to say my local public library was underfunded, and they took out all of the historical books and replaced them with, I don't even know, content that was highly questionable. So
okay, that's true. There has been. Okay, I do want to share a little bit of a digression here.
Before we do that, let's put a pin in that and come right back to it. So B or C is what you'd rate, and there's probably certain aspects you'd give it. Oh, it's the kitty.
She does run. She's an attention witch. She always runs through. Go ahead.
There's probably a few areas that America scores an A on, and some that it scores an F on, right?
I mean, F is like public health care, like
right.
Yeah, and then A is probably the post office. The public libraries are probably at a C, or a B, and then I have not much experience with food stamps and so on, but that's probably a C because I've heard so many things about it. But
gotcha.
Go on, refine a question. So
now let's take that same question and let's apply it to Uruguay.
Okay, so in Uruguay we have free public education from preschool to university, and I think even for like grad schools, I'm pretty sure. And and I'll give the caveat now. I should say it later, but it's a country of 3 million people, the smallest country, second smallest. The other smallest one is French Guyana, but those are barely countries. They're more like little.
Are you admitting that Paraguay is bigger and badder than you?
I'm admitting that it's bigger, but we have a shared history. Our founding father loved Paraguay, the Uruguay's founding father. He was exiled there. That's another story. But the important thing here is some people, and this is what the Fox News kind of conservatives always tell to people who tout and really defend, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Norway, these tiny libtard republics in Europe, where people in those republics are super wealthy and super well off, supposedly, and they have free healthcare, free universities, free everything. It seems like they're living welfare queen lives, but they're also educated and have respectable, modern careers. I'm sorry, is she making lots of noise?
That's right. Just pick her up and put her in the camera so everyone can see Brujita. Look at that cute little kitty. Oh, yeah. That's adorable. I love her.
Me too.
She's so much bigger than the last time that I saw her. Wow.
She's actually, at this point, she's about twice as large.
Wow. She's probably a lot heavier, too.
I don't think so.
She's the same. Heavy. She's the same weight. She just got less dense
and longer.
She's very filled with air.
That can happen. I should start weighing her. That's actually a good point. That's interesting.
She got larger, but not heavier. It's defying physics. We got to figure this out. But so what would you? So free healthcare free healthcare and free college. That sounds pretty good. As a counter argument, Russia, with a country of 130 million or over 100 million, offers free healthcare to all of its citizens, and they have a GDP that's like 1/8 of ours in the United States.
Yeah.
So they have close to 40% of our population, and they only have 12% of our GDP, and they can do it. So.
Yeah. So that's the kind of point where I would resort to a mathematician to say if that's possible. But I will also
I'm pretty clearly.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Well, here's what I'm saying. In my opinion, the United States isn't, if we're being particular about it, it's not really one country. It's a bunch of different states or countries or like places. I mean, how different is New Jersey from Oklahoma, or something like that?
That's very good. You have read the name of the country, United States.
I mean, it's important because some people conservatives have a sense of how divided the country is, and liberals always have this federal idea. I mean, that's been there since the beginning. I mean, why confederate states rather than federated states? And so the point is, to keep ourselves thin and on the mark, why all it is a bunch of tiny Uruguays. You get what I'm saying? What's the most heavily populated state? Is it New York or California?
Oh, Philadelphia has 3 or 4 million, maybe.
Yeah.
And then what do you think New York has? These are totally made up in my head. They could be really wrong. I'm guessing New York has 10 million.
So I think I heard 15 million at some point.
15 million. Wow.
I think I heard that at one point. I mean, it's very tight. It's very tight. So one thing that people want, like I grew up like going to New York a lot and like being one train ride from New York. So when I visited Europe, like Amsterdam, Paris, London, and when I visited Montevideo, when I visited with my mom there, I'm always surprised by how much less dense the cities are.
Yeah.
And for most of the country, it's also like New York is quite the city.
So what would you rate Uruguay? What would you rate it overall? America was B or C. What is Uruguay?
I would have to say an A, because people bitch and complain all the time, non-stop, that the lines are too long at the doctors, and that people aren't getting enough for their pensions, and people aren't getting enough from the government retirement, and people don't get enough from their welfare. But at the same time that people complain, there's a joke that says Uruguayans don't like to work, and people joke about it all the time. So we have this sort of very laissez-faire French kind of, and the French are like this also. As you might know, French are, they're always bitching, they're always protesting, and the Uruguayans are always protesting. Yet, I mean, the social services are fantastic. I mean, my aunt, who was born in a poor, dingy village house, my grandma's house, where for the longest time they didn't have hot water. They still don't have hot water, and for the longest time they didn't have. Um,
that's a,
they didn't.
that's a long
Okay,
time. So it's still going on.
well, okay. So my aunt was born in the 70s or late 60s. No, yeah, mid 70s.
Oh, I have to
And
sit differently. Oh God, I'm sorry. My legs were falling asleep like that.
that's all right. That's all right.
Ooh,
And
baby.
in the house when she was young and poor with my grandma having 5 kids, and first of all, those 5 kids and my grandparents and my grandma and grandpa were made to fit in a house smaller, like one of those redneck one-story kind of things, like one of those.
Okay. Yeah.
So very Pennsylvania kind of crammed together, 5 kids and so on. 2 kids minimum per room, and small rooms. And there's only 2 rooms in the. Anyway, point is,
No jerking off in the common fare.
they must have had their techniques, backyard
Techniques?
or.
What is that like? Bathroom? Did you have a bathroom? You had a bathroom.
I didn't. I mean, I've been here in the U.S. my whole life. I've been
Fucking
living that.
teasing you.
Oh, okay.
You were a child. You lived there, right?
No, I came here when I was 4. I turned
So
5 here.
3. 3 is a child.
Fair.
You have no memories from being there?
The only memories I have are the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But
you've known this life of luxury the whole time. Yeah.
that's why I cling to my father a lot, because my father has the strength, the willpower, the wisdom, the ruggedness of a person who grows up without the decadence of American luxury and American safety. But I going back to the main thing, many Uruguayans live this, and it's not a horrible poverty, not even close, because
It's a reasonable poverty.
on the edge of reasonable. It's on the edge.
It's
Because
almost unreasonable.
it is, because okay, so for the longest time until they installed a hot water heater, they didn't have hot waters for showers. So they showered on a warm day in winter. They would shower quickly, and then it'd be like jumping into the pool. But the weather in Uruguay never gets, like, it never snows, so there's no ontological cultural motivation. So the coldest winter they have is like a chilly fall here,
Yeah.
and and so it's still a bitch to shower in the cold water, but it doesn't kill you, doesn't make you sick, and actually it makes you actually. It's funny. The past few weeks in quarantine, I've been working out too much, and I remember what my cross country coach said. Don't. So there's many Americans who make their muscles and their bodies unfeeling because they're always at the hottest, like almost steaming. And it's good to do that for a few minutes in the shower, but there's people who do that for like 35 minutes to self-therapize, therapy, and to feel good. When what you should do, and what I do, especially when I work out, is I begin hot to kind of waken the body, clean it up, because that
And then
hot water.
you gradually turn it down.
Exactly, until eventually it's like Uruguayan coldness. But it's good to have that hot water. And uh, even today, my grandma's house doesn't have an indoor heating. It has a fireplace which burns up the entire living room, which is small, and they have a little plug-in heater in the bedroom, so that when they're in the bedroom they can be warm. And if when they don't want to spend that much money, they turn it off. my point here is this: I would rather live, and for the longest time I didn't feel this because I was so luxuriously pampered in the US. But now with coronavirus, I've been really thinking about this. I would rather live in a country or in a place where I have so many free services like the library and especially healthcare. That's a big one. That's the big one. And free university. But less luxuries. And I have like wintry countries like this need indoor heating for sure. So that should be like a human right, indoor heating, you know?
Sure.
But you know, countries like so it's Uruguay really don't. So I'd rather be in a place where people have to carefully be resourceful with how they preserve and save things, and then when they get sick, or if they get sick of something like heart attack or something natural, because that's how we all slowly decay, or they can have those services for free or for at least for. I mean, there are insurance companies in Uruguay, and wealthy people have them, and they give you a bit of a speed and a bit of a privilege, but it's not necessary. In the same way that honestly, private school is not necessary. It's only necessary if you look at this life as some sort of competition with everyone else. And I don't think that's a very healthy ideology or philosophy of how to live, you know?
Fair enough. Now I'm curious. Let's, if we can, transition a little bit. We were gonna do some more comparative grading, but instead of doing that, let's skip over and talk a little bit about American religion.
Yeah, that's good.
So
All right,
let's talk about what you think. D.H. Lawrence had a concept called vital religion, right? It's the religion of the common people. It's not metaphysically complex. It's not intellectually complicated or rigorous, but it gets the job done. It gets people, their meaning button is tapped down and hits that brain really nice. So, vital religion in the United States, what does it look like? Let's look at it topographically, how it relates to vital religion in other countries. Of course, we know vital religion is not intellectually conditioned. It's not rigorous phenomenologically. It's not metaphysically advanced. It is simple. It is basic. It is reliable for people whose everyday experiences are struggle and difficulty and stress and pain and loss. It helps them to make sense of this experience. And in America, we have a very, very noticeable nationalism. We have a nationalism that extends beyond what you might say is even a regular nationalism. It's a special kind of nationalism that not only prioritizes itself, but it kind of acts as though there is nothing beyond itself. In a way that maybe you do see, like, okay, maybe you see in propaganda or indoctrination when you go to Greece, right? And maybe they're indoctrinated when they have obligatory military duty or whatever. But when you look at the United States, we're a people who, there's a large percentage of us who wonder why everyone isn't speaking English. You know, why are there people at all that don't speak English? There's really people in this country who can't fathom how it is that someone could speak a quote unquote, Mexican language, and think that's like adequate, reasonable thought. So when we're dealing with people like that, those people have to have religious experiences also. What does this combination of American nationalism, American exceptionalism, and vital religion, what does it look like? What is it creating?
Americans have always been vital religion and vital religion only. What defines the old world, you know, in Hegel and this any Geist philosophy, any subjective philosophy, is the idea that the old world fundamentally represents these age-old, built upon complex structures. Catholicism is complex, you know, endless rituals, endless saints, endless figures, endless characters. Protestantism isn't. European Protestantism is. I mean, very complex. very scholastic, very metaphysical. American Protestantism is not Calvinism. Now, of course, very few conservative Americans are like
That
scholastic.
American Protestantism is not Calvinism.
No, it can be that, but there is a feeling to American, a more general, more widespread, more widely scoped American Christianity, American Protestantism, which is very simple and very homely and very vital. It's almost entirely vital to the point of being only chicken scratch or chicken bones left of the large metaphysical, ontological, existential idea of Christianity. If we go seriously back to the root, American vital religion is Walmart. Walmart is a cathedral. I have religious experiences at Walmart. Walmart, here's what America is in its most vital religious experience from a Christian point of view. We could talk about American Judaism and American Hinduism, but on the whole, American Hinduism, American Buddhism are new phenomena. They haven't, and in the next 100, 200 years, I'm sure that those traditions will develop an American sentimentalism, an American minimalism, in the same way that Christianity was affected by American minimalism or became minimalized in American stuff. But in short, American vital religion is experiencing your decadence, your indulgence through the eyes of a Jesus, of a Christian deity, of the Christian God, mercifully and forgivingly overlooking or accepting or being okay with that indulgence. So American Christianity is waking up at 9 on a Sunday morning rather than 7 or 8, going to 10:30 a.m. service. The service isn't highly ritualized, but it's full of the children singing. It's very showmanship, right? And sometimes even you'll just watch from your bed. Whereas in other countries, they will wake up super early for church, for mass, for service. 5 a.m., 6 a.m. They'll do it very briefly, very crisply, very meditative, very ritual, and then they'll do something else with the day. But in America, you're done with church, right? And you have coffee hour, you socialize, that's what people are doing. Then, as was in my family's tradition, we would go out to the mall or Walmart or Wendy's. One of the most common things we did almost every Sunday, after a very pious, the whole family in the pew, my grandma praying furiously, we sang the hymns, we did classical Christian stuff, heard the preacher preach about, the Eucharist, the communion, about the mercy of Jesus, the forgiveness in his blood. That's important, right? The forgiveness. That's one philosopher said that Christianity can be reduced to two words: Jesus saves. This radical feeling of sanctification and salvation by Jesus, not by anything you do, not by any sanctification you work. And that cheap grace, which technically is not foundational to German Protestantism, but it's foundational to American Protestantism because of how it clicks with consumerism, legitimates you're going to church on Sunday morning and then by 11 or noon going to Wendy's in the mall. So that was our afternoon. We would go to church, we would fulfill our duties with the Lord, get it out of the way, but feeling good about it because yeah, we sometimes we got it out of the way, even though we felt good in church, um, because then we were allowed to indulge, right? And so a burger at Wendy's, walking promenade, taking a Sunday afternoon stroll promenade through the mall or Walmart, doing your groceries for the week, coming home, taking a nap, getting ready for the next day. You could almost forget the existential agony of Monday morning. And this is something I held very deeply, very tenderly in me. Even today, as you know, I'm a music minister and church organist and pianist and choir director. And when I was dating Emma, one of the favorite things we did after she came with me to a church service, blah, 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 one of the favorite things we did was just take a nice walk through Walmart after the service.
I have
And
had the pleasure of being with you on a couple of your Walmart experiences, and I know the light that lights up in your face. But I want to ask you here before we end this. Uh, you have a kind of interesting you have a kind of interesting composite picture of religious metaphysics, where you kind of see a syncretism or a perennialism that you like to build on, and specifically for you, that seems to be Hinduism, Christianity, and certain select aspects of probably Buddhism and Judaism and several. Would you like to kind of talk a little bit about how you derive meaning from the religious complexities of globalism, and also the way that you, through doing that, resurrect a meaningful experience against the sort of skepticism or that you might face, or in face of a sort of juvenile insistence on exceptionalism?
One of the biggest conflicts in my heart is between the particularness of a religion, not the exclusiveness. The particular by particularness I mean what it feels like to feel that religion's existential moment or that religion's existential moments or experiences alone, rather than the sort of academic, removed, semi. Uh, so it's difference of between reading about something or looking something at a museum and intellectually acknowledging its purpose, its meaning, its whatever, versus the experience of being in a museum and losing yourself in the portrait, right? When I first began learning about many other religions, I let myself reluctantly and scaredly um, try my best and almost unconsciously to feel that religion's conversion moment, let's call it, right? Sincerely, fully within the context of their ideology. Because when I was younger, 12, 13 or there, I had what I would call a conversion experience. Even though I was going to church all the time, all of a sudden I thought about it. All of a sudden it made sense. All of a sudden I was curious. All of a sudden I wanted to go to church rather than being brought to. And so my first religious experience, my first conversion moment or rebirth, whatever, the way they call it, was within particularly Catholic Christianity, but a type of more universal Catholic Christianity, not a traditional Catholicism, a sort of semi-Protestant American Catholicism, kind of the standard modern Catholicism. And what I think is the heart of what happens in a conservative person, in their hate for other religions or in their exclusive clinching to the idea of the exclusive correctness, the exclusive beauty and truth of their religion, is that they go from a life of semi-abstract, purposeless pleasures, or almost like treating life as a hobby, as a meaningless circuit through things to do like video games for me or Legos as a kid, to something of deep purpose, higher meaning. And for many people, when they find that in one experience and they go back to their regular life, they can't find it again. And they don't know, or they're not part of another community, like the Jewish community or Hindu community or a Christian community. They're not part of another religious community because of their family, their background, their ethnicity. So they cling on to that because that's where they had that experience. And most things don't give that. That religious experience does. But when you meet a family of faithful Jews or a family of faithful Hindus or whatever, and and you understand when you see them gathering in their services or in their temples, and you understand even though you're removed from it, you say, ah, but they're having an experience which I had in some form. Then you realize that is what you felt, and when you have that out of body, that out of yourself experience, you realize you get scared at first. It's always fearful because what you have to do to respect and honor other people is you have to undermine the most transcendent experiences in yourself and realize that you can have them while others are having them at the same time through different ideologies or pictures, images, snapshots of psychology of religiosity. So for
I
me,
like that. I
and
like that you're.
yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no.
I was just gonna say
So
I
for
like
me,
that concept a lot. We've just played rope-a-dope with each other.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
go 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 go. I'll go.
Okay,
I'll go.
you can go. You're like, no, you go. All right, go ahead.
So for me, I can't deny that for a while during my more conservative traditionalist period, my biggest, and even today, my biggest religious experiences have been within the Christian structure, the Christian ontology. And so I've had meaningful Hindu experiences or Buddhist experiences, but I don't feel like it's kind of like dating someone, falling in love with someone. Unless the relationship is completely broken up with the other one, with the other girlfriend or ex partner, you don't feel completely honest. You don't feel completely in it. Like,
Well, that's not necessarily true if you have a good polyamorous relationship.
what I was gonna mention that. Um, I agree. I mean, polygamy has existed for a while, and polyamory is that polygamy falls under the branch of polyamory. I agree with that. But that's a whole other topic. But what I'm trying, but to make the answer to that topic brief, is that
Well, you have a first
most
love, right? You have a first love, and you can't
exactly,
ever forget your first love. It's like the first
exactly,
person to take you to Disney World or something, or whatever it is. First person to show you they love you. You're always going to have that impression.
exactly. And so I
Or
don't want to lose that.
as Professor Bryant would say, a samskara.
Exactly, precisely. And so I think, in how I feel about life and things, that I shouldn't be unfaithful to those first powerful religious moments. Where I am religiously and metaphysically now is millions of miles away, almost a galaxy away from my first initial kind of conversion experiences. Um, but the foundational things, the key central things of Christianity, which most Christians will agree on, I still keep and believe in sincerely. I can skeptically and philosophically undermine it, but it's interesting. Most of doctrinal Christianity, I can actually even defend and sustain by the metaphysics of other traditions. Like, indeed, the surprising thing is that Christianity, in my opinion, and that it's a very liberal opinion, is that Christianity can be better upheld and sustained by the metaphysics of Hinduism and Buddhism, because of what I consider to be historical links and traces, than by Enlightenment or empirical or any other Western tradition. I honestly even think that already as soon as in Augustine or as soon as Aquinas, we're already perhaps getting some metaphysical
Well,
distantiation.
I would ask one question. So, the audience for this show primarily are a diverse group of people who may or may not be very interested in organized religious structures, and I'm curious what you might have to say to them. I mean, personally, the way that I look at it is there's a ground of being, and the ground of being or the ground of change, the ground of becoming, we tap into that. Each of us, it's a psychological adventure. And once we find it, it's transformative. And the way that we find it, the language that we use to find that is religious language. It's religious experience gives us the vehicle to find that space, that ontological space where we do this transformation as people. And we all get there, but some of us we get there in maybe like on the back of like a stallion, and someone else is in a Maserati, and the relative nature of those qualities being good or bad, are not withstanding. So the idea here is like we're all tapping into this state of transformational ground And the way that we first access that, it's sort of it has like a hypnotic impact on us. We can't really get away from it. It's almost meta framing our whole understanding. So, but I am curious, some things that you certainly by your defense of Christianity, you don't mean an exclusivism of Christianity. You just mean that for you, aesthetically, you like it, and it speaks to you. And but also that you've had moments where Buddhism, Hinduism, etc., probably especially Hinduism, have spoken to you. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing just maybe one of those experiences.
I'll try to share the experience of. I'll give one key experience of Hinduism and one key experience of Buddhism. Right. Um, I dated a Hindu girl for 3 years, and that was at the end of my more conservative Catholic faith. I was never a full-on conservative because the Enlightenment liberalism, Enlightenment philosophy always held had an important place in my kind of let people be kind of ideology, you know. Um, but in my most conservative, I was like, let people be, but I'm right or we are right, you know. But I wasn't that for long. But anyway, what dating her and going to the temple and just seeing the gods, the Hindu gods in the images, they're so serene, so prayerful, so calm, and so beautiful, truly beautiful. I mean, I went with her to this beautiful temple in Maryland once, and each of the idols, of the icons, of the images of the different deities made a powerful impact on me, like long lasting. And I know it was in part because I loved her and she showed me them so tenderly, but because she was the tender link between me and my religious experiences and her religious, because she would come with her religious experiences, because she would come with me to church and also gaze and awe at this beautiful stained glass window and paintings. We were, because love melted down that doctrinal concern, and that that religious rigor, we were able to breach the gap of culture and religion, which is already breached by living in America and speaking English and going to the same schools and so on. And look at each other's traditions not through the lens of our some scars, our religions, our backgrounds, but through the lens of how the other person for a lifetime was seeing it. You know,
Right.
I felt that she saw the stained glasses and beautiful paintings at my church with the same purity and sincerity as I saw the beautiful images of the deities. I remember the one of Shiva and Parvati, the one of mm, Manu or uh, some other, I think it was a Jain saint, and the Tulsidas image was so beautiful. And the area surrounding the temple was so crystalline as a garden. And I had a feeling, and this is actually perfect, that somehow this beautiful temple fit perfectly into the placid, transcendental greenery of classical Maryland and New England American Anglo-Saxon Protestantism. I could, just the way it was settled into the nature, because American Protestantism loves the idea of greenery and transcendentalism, this kind of transcendence in nature. And the way the temple was situated, it felt light on the ground, in the same way that a simple old, Quaker meeting house or an old Unitarian church or an old Reformed church, for that matter, feels ideologically easy on the land. I love Islam and I respect it, but because of all the politics lately, sometimes I'll drive past the church, I mean a mosque, and I'll no hatred, but I can feel how some other people might feel ideological tension.
Yeah.
This is a Christian nation, something like that.
Well,
But
it's funny that
wait,
you said,
before you say that, but
yeah.
In Newark, there's an old 50s Nation of Islam mosque, and you drive past that, and there's lots of black African American volunteers, and you don't feel that tension. So
Interesting.
go ahead.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that you touched on it, like basically the fundamental component of how one might integrate new religious experience into their house of meaning, and that is through trust. It's through trust. You have to find someone that you trust and who is like is the real deal, essentially, like somebody who's not like a scam. You have to find somebody that knows what the fuck they're talking about, that really lives that reality, and you become initiated by them into that world of meaning. You can't do it on your own. You have to find that person. Otherwise you'll just read your own tradition onto that picture, and it'll come out looking wrong a million ways. But if you find somebody you trust and you begin to be able to see through their eyes, that's right. That's the beginning. So it makes sense to me that you were able to get that from your girlfriend that you dated, who was a Hindu. So that's a cherishable thing because you didn't have to have that.
No, and I'm thankful that, going back to the Uruguayan thing a little bit, most Uruguayans, it's the most liberal country in Uruguay. It's the only country in Latin America. It's the only country in Latin America that legalized gay marriage and legal weed or marijuana usage. So we've been called the Switzerland of Latin America in the past. Sometimes people now call it the Netherlands of
Or
Latin America.
I like the broke Switzerland.
Yes, exactly. Broke Switzerland, exactly. And what do we call it? We've had the highest literacy rate in Latin America since like 1900. So
Oh wow.
we're a bit of a pretentious people in a sense. Like, and so most people had this sort of Voltairean skepticism and towards organized religion or towards religion, this kind of enlightenment skepticism. And so um, and then there's still lots of traditional conservative Catholics because of being colonized by the Spanish. But my family, we always grew up with that sort of Uruguayan skepticism, Uruguayan liberalism, Uruguayan. Our religiosity was always open for interpretation. We were never dogmatic, and so
Got
I
it.
think, thankfully, I have that heritage. And then when I dated Emma, you know, she was this kind of classic white American church girl. Like, she went to an old Dutch Reformed church, but one of the RCA, Reformed Church of America, which is the most liberal of the Reformed traditions. And so her pastor slowly tried to defend climate change to a church of mostly Republican white people, And her pastor is a nice libtard, let's call it. I love the term libtard; it's so hilarious. Um,
But aren't you a
and
libtard?
I'm a proud libtard. Thanks be to God. And and so her pastor, this
What
kind
is
of
that? What's that cough, Mister?
it's COVID-19. Heck, I'm so fucked up. I got COVID-20.
Oh,
We'll workshop that one.
just everybody let that one sink in.
Oh gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think the key is love. I think if I had not fallen in love with these two girls and had a meaningful relationship with both of them, and I'm currently falling in love with a third girl, I had a little social
The
distancing.
only chapter of Corinthians that I like, chapter 13.
Well, the famous atheist Christopher Hitchens, he loved St. Paul's writings, but he always said in several sections because he says and he was always shocked because he's one of the most famous atheists. He wrote, God is not great and so on.
Sure.
He said he was always shocked with how I'll paraphrase it, but basically St. Paul is a bunch of anger and frustration and bitching and just nastiness, and yet throughout almost every epistle or every section, like there's one chapter or two that they're just so beautiful. I mean, I recite myself quotes from Galatians and Philippians and Corinthians and Romans. Even Romans is beautiful, surprisingly.
Well, yeah. I mean, Romans
in
is
isolation.
probably the most robust Greek that we have of Paul. So
Romans is beautiful. It's an epic kind of, yeah. Hebrews is
obviously,
also
Paul got a new manservant. Tertius was doing a better job, is all I'm saying.
There we go.
You know, the previous guy, let's call him like I don't know, Bob.
Secundus.
Bob was weak. Okay, Bob was really weak, and honestly, some of his letters were trash. No, I'm kidding. But the most beautiful letter in the New Testament by far, Hebrews,
I would say Philippians.
in terms of the quality of the Greek.
Oh yeah. Well, people always say that it's probably not by, most likely not by Paul.
It's not Pauline because it's too freaking wonderful. In terms of the Greek, it's almost it's beyond. I don't know. Actually, I'm not a Greek scholar. I know that generally the New Testament's written in Koine and philosophical treatises, etc., were written in Attic. But I think that Hebrews is that one that it either is at the pinnacle of what Koine can do, or it's kind of an intermediate. You know.
I'd love to learn biblical Greek one day.
Well,
One
we
day.
have a friend going to seminary, so you can.
He's gonna enjoy it.
That's curiouser and curiouser. But yeah, so let's leave on final note that you want to let everybody know. Can be on anything we talked about or something totally funny, random, whatever you want. Just final thoughts.
I'll say something to kind of in favor of a more conservative idea.
No,
Today,
I won't let you do it. Stop it. You're doing the opposite of the point of the podcast. I'm going to slap the shit out of you. You need to be, this is a good place for you to be as high in openness as possible. Not the opposite.
Well, you'll see. You'll see. Right now, we live.
He's going to show me, you guys. He's going to argue for the truthfulness of Jesus, and it's going to be open. It's going to be real open.
So, right now, we live in a time in America where people are very divided, and every little cultural difference between a liberal or conservative, a Christian or secular person, and left and right Republican Democrat becomes a war point, like veganism or vegetarianism, which historically many Christians have practiced, and which is ecologically very good to try to take. Even if we just do meat once or twice a week, it helps move the path to something healthier, so that eventually maybe we can have a system of meat production that's more healthy and safe. In that process of liberal hipster toxicity or labeling things as toxic or negative, a lot of the things that fall under that are what conservative Americans traditionally consider homely Americanisms, like a barbecue, like a hot dog, like going to Walmart and buying a lot and enjoying surplus, versus the hipster idea of minimalism. I love vintage American culture. I love a diner that's open 24/7 where you can go with your Harley Davidson.
I know how much you love a diner.
I love it. Where you can go with your Harley Davidson and have a coffee and a pancake at 3 a.m. I love scrambled eggs. I love a delicatessen, that classic, American kosher, Jewish, Italian kind of New York deli. I love a luncheonette. These are all words: diner, luncheonette, um, delicatessen, and they evoke a very 30s, 20s, 50s, 40s America where we were very positive about where we are. I believe there's a path somewhere between the toxic consumerist wasteland of preservative, fat, full McDonald's burgers and this sort of self-whipping, self-loathing, white guilt liberalism that reaches a point of non-enrichment to the soul, and non-homeliness. The biggest problem with hipsterism or extreme uh, white people guilt, white people liberalism, white people liberalism versus like Latino liberalism or Black liberalism. The biggest problem is this persistent negativity, this persistent exhaustion with life, this sense that the best thing we can do is actually surprisingly Christian, surprisingly slave morality, surprisingly self-whipping, surprisingly monastic. That what we can do in life is uh, sadly atone for past misdeeds and current misdeeds. And what I think is surprisingly ironic about the sort of conservative ideology is that it's bitterness because of something joyful that's lost. And so we need to realize that no ideology has the full truth. Instead, they all have pieces of truth. And so, can there be a sort of healthy, ecologically friendly diner or a McDonald's where you go and the food doesn't kill you? You know, can we have a McDonald's not just with vegan burgers or healthy burgers, but a regular actual meat burger that's ecologically friendly and when you eat it, you don't feel like shit? You know? Can we have American homeliness, which is a little decadent, which is a little fatty? Just be less fatty, be less toxic for the soul. Can we have that? Can and that's my worry. Whether American liberals, white liberals, who understand what needs to be done to make the world a better place, can they bring that kind of like slave morality loathing of life to a more embracing and can do attitude? So I think that's the problem, perhaps.
Fair enough. So, bridge to moderation. Moderation in sort of in the face of a nihilism that's caused all kinds of sort of retrofit, slave morality that stems from the reverse engineering of Christian or Judeo-Christian moral structures being inverted on the individual or something like this. Yeah, can we have a moderation that is healthier than what we have, as opposed to having further and further rifting, further and further division, where the unhealthy gets more unhealthy, and the healthy becomes more ideal and therefore less available or possible, etc. So moderation.
And the other thing is associated with eliteness, associated with being educated and knowing what, being high class, being a hipster, being yeah.
Right. And to what degree is that pretense beneficial? And if we eliminate that, how much easier would it be to integrate people's? I have found, for example, if you can get rid of labels, you can get Republicans to agree that we should have universal health care. Or, you can get various people to agree with concepts that are platform opposing because they haven't hit the hot word buzzword. We haven't, and I think fundamentally it's because when we respect people and we grant them reasonable intellect, when we say, hey, I don't think you're an idiot, I think I understand what you're saying, it makes sense. When you give that person that give them that, then they end up reciprocating by listening to you. Whereas most of the modern discourse is rhetorical dismissal, which it doesn't encourage anything but further ideological barriers to integrating our society. So I think, yeah, I would say that's an interesting concept. I wonder if we can do it. I hope we can. I'm skeptical, but I'm optimistic too. So we will see. But anyways, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Mr. Facundo. It was a pleasure. And maybe next time we'll have an episode where nosotros podremos hablar en español para todas las personas.
That would be lovely. I would love to have the Spanish episode. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this because I, first of all, I agree with everything you just said at the end. It really means a lot. And as friends, we talk about these topics often, but when we talk about it in this structured back and forth, knowing that other people will probably see this and also be thinking about it, so it's a bit of a more formal setting. It's like therapeutic. It's healing almost. It's like we are. I, I don't even know what the word is, but it's a wonderful form of sharing, and it reminds me of many happy memories with exes and friends and family, and it makes me very joyful.
Well, I am glad to hear that. And so are the 3 people that are going to watch this. No, I'm kidding.